Well, hello everyone. I hope you're doing well. And here we are in the third week already of our course, and it's hard to believe we're like January 20th already. I don't know where the time has gone. So here we are, like third week into our course, and I mentioned on the syllabus that I would be doing weekly videos, but it's probably not going to work out that way. I probably, as I thought about it, I thought that maybe that was a little ambitious, and then I thought, well, you don't need to see my face that much anyway. So I'm probably just going to do a video now and then every couple of weeks when issues come up that I want to talk about in particular, and just to touch bases with you and to say hello and just to, as I said, just chat a little bit about the topics at hand. And today is one of those days. I want to talk a little bit about the difference between Canada and US in our chapter in chapter 4, which I think is important for us to understand some of those differences. Before we get there, though, I just have a couple housekeeping issues here. One of the things that I really would promote with you and ask you to consider is really do look at populating the tab on our Moodle site called Look What I Found. Already we've got some great resources popping in there, and I've stolen a couple of them already and given them to my undergraduate class in exceptionalities, and they really appreciate those. Those are very good resources, so keep bringing them to the site. And just when you have a really good resource that we could use, please put it in there because we really do value it. And finally, April 9th is going to be our day that we get together. Now, I checked with you from emails to see what days you could not possibly make it, and the only day that was open after we did that exercise was April 9th. So Saturday, April 9th will be really our culminating exercise where we will get together and we will celebrate a good year together, but we're also going to have some interesting sessions together, and you'll hear more on that. I'll send more to you in the days to come. So book your hotel or book your flight or whatever you have to do. Make a weekend of it in Lethbridge, and really look forward to spending some time with you and meeting with you and discussing the course with you and other things. And you can feel free to drop me a line or drop by in my office anytime. I had a wonderful visit yesterday with one of you, and I very much appreciate that. So if you're in the area and you want to drop in and just have a chat, please do so. I'd love to do that. All right, so just briefly, I want to talk to you about differences between the United States and Canada. But I'm going to say, first of all, that the differences within Canada are much greater than the differences between Canada and the United States. So I'm going to draw your attention actually to what's on the website right now, what you see beside me here. And this is a very interesting site from the Canadian Pediatric Society. And in there, they list for you, they have this list of special education legislation and contacts all across the country. And so it's, as you can see, it's a interactive map. And so when you click on somebody like Alberta, instantly you'll see special education policy. That's the one that I've already put on our website. And there's two. You'll notice that there's one for early childhood education, and that's for children that are below the age of 6. And then there is this one for children who are 6 and above. So you can read through all of that, and every province is different and mostly the same, but there are some interesting differences. And for instance, in Alberta, we require that before this process really even gets going, that we have to have informed consent from the parents. Not so in other provinces. In fact, provinces are very careful about their language. And if you were to check out, for instance, Ontario's special education policy, you'll see that they're very careful in the language they use around consulting parents, but they don't require parents' signature for certain things. And in New Brunswick, it was the same when I was there. We consult with parents and we inform parents, but there is no informed consent in some places. They act in the best interest of the child, but they don't necessarily have to have the parents agree. In fact, if you look at the Ontario document, if parents disagree with the identification of their student as exceptional or placement options, they have certain routes that they can go to appeal it. And still, though, if they don't sign off on it or don't appeal or go through the proper channels, the school can go ahead and put in place special programming without the parent's consent or signature, and it's on the parent to appeal and to go through proper process. So let's talk a little bit, first of all, about differences between Canada and the United States. Now, unlike the United States, we do not have really a federal Department of Education. We do have the Canadian Ministers of Education, and they are probably the closest thing in our country, the CMEC, to a federal body where the ministers of education actually get together and talk about policy and law and different things like that, and different things that we're going to do across the country. But in the United States, they do have a federal Department of Education that is extremely well funded, and they do have law at that level that influences the rest of the country. Maybe, and I say maybe. Now, it has, but it doesn't have to. For instance, the federal government department of the Federal Department of Education in the United States, or even the Federal Special Education Department, can say, this is the new law of the land, and we want you to abide by it at the state level. In fact, we'll fund it if you sign on the dotted line saying at the state level, yeah, this is going to be state law as well. So it's sort of a carrot stick mentality that says we will fund it if you sign it into law. And once you sign it into law and we give the money to you to fund your programs and to fund education, you have to do what federal law says, because now it's state law. But education's still in the hands of the state. And there are some states who don't sign on to different types of law in the United States, or different types of programs in the United States. They decide not to sign in. Now in Canada, education has remained in provincial hands. It's a provincial jurisdiction. And so we still require that education follows in Canada the Canadian Charter of Rights and freedoms in this country. And so that is basically the overarching law of our country. Whereas in the United States, they've chosen to go with IDEA, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act in 2004, or the Individual with Disabilities Education Improvement Act is what it's now called. No Child Left Behind is not the law, the special education law, but it is also law that helps to regulate other things. So some people think that No Child Left Behind is their law, but it's not. It's IDEA is what governs special education in the United States. No Child Left Behind is really a general education law that governs other aspects of education in the United States. So let's just talk a little bit briefly. I think if I was to say that the biggest difference between Canada and the United States, what would the biggest difference be between Canada and the United States? I honestly think it's just tone. In the United States, they have litigation is central to special education. In fact, your textbook said, and I've got a couple quotes here, your textbook said litigation plays a critical role in special education. In fact, one of the quotes also was, a violation of a regulation, therefore, is as serious as a violation of the law. And people lose their jobs in the United States through thousands of lawsuits every year. Now, one of the people that were mentioned in our text on a fairly regular basis, I had the opportunity one year to, I'm just trying to find my textbook, where would I do with it? I guess I put it underneath here. I had the opportunity one year to go to a pre-conference workshop on special education law. And one of the authors in our chapter was there presenting a whole session on special education law. And he told this story, which was, Dr. Bateman told a story which is fascinating. He said in one instance, and this doesn't happen in Canada, you don't see this happening in Canada, but in one instance, a school principal and a school special education teacher were at odds with one another, and they were fighting. And because this was a very large school, the principal never really read the IEPs. Now that happens a lot in Canada too. Principals don't really study the IEPs to know every part of them because they're very busy people, unfortunately. And if parents knew that, I think they would press more and say, I want to make sure you know what's on that IEP before you sign it. Well, in this particular state, where this principal and this IEP, or this special education teacher were having a fight, she wanted to take it out on this principal, and it got really nasty. And every year, at a particular time in October, they used to have the IEP signing day. And what the principal would do is he'd have tables laid out in the gymnasium, and all the IEPs of the whole school, of every special education teacher, they just lay them out on the tables, and he would just go sign them really quickly to get it over with. So she factored into every IEP that every child had to have a new computer system. It was required. This is before laptops. And they would have to have a whole new desktop computer, each student fully loaded with all the bells and whistles and all the software that that child could possibly use, like Kurzweil and everything else. She wrote it into every IEP for every student in the school that was on an IEP. Of course, he blindly signed all the IEPs. And then all the parents started lining up and saying, "Where's my new computer system?" Bateman said that in the end, that special education teacher lost her job, the principal lost his job, and that the district had to provide every one of those students with a brand new computer program, a computer system, because that's what was written into the IEP and signed into the IEP. Now, we don't go to that extent in Canada. We tend to negotiate, we tend to work with parents more, and they do too in the United States. And I don't want us to get off on this and think that the United States is just about law, because they're not. The United States is so much like us in so many ways. Parents tend to work closely with teachers and the principal and the school, and when that's not resolved, then they tend to say, look, they appeal, and they may go to the district level or whatever and say, look, I want this to be addressed. And if they can't get their concerns addressed, then they can sue, especially if the needs of their student are not being met according to the IEP. And the IEP is a legal document, a legally binding document. Well, we kind of look at that in Canada as well. We look at the IEP as this blueprint for all the services and placement of students with exceptionalities, and we expect teachers to follow that IEP. But you generally don't see parents taking the IEP to court and saying, look, it's not followed to the letter of the law. We don't see that in Canada. Instead, we often see parents will go to the school, and if they don't get it resolved, they'll appeal to the district. And if they don't get it resolved, they'll appeal to the province. And if they don't get it resolved and something is serious enough, then we will take it as a human rights case to a human rights tribunal. And we try to get things solved that way. And a number of cases have been solved through human rights cases in Canada, because parents have exhausted all their avenues of appeal and haven't been met. In the United States, they'll go to courts and they'll get things settled at the court level. And if a jurisdiction court's rules, then it applies to that jurisdiction. If it goes to the state level, then it applies to the state, and then if it goes to the Supreme Court, it applies to the whole country for all of those states that have signed into that law. In Canada, the tone tends to be that we'll solve it at the school level first, and parents and principals often work together to solve these things. And principals often take the long view. We say, well, if the parent's not happy with the IEP right now, then we'll work with them. We'll try to massage it so that we can work with them to get these things solved. So I think out of all the things that I saw in that chapter, I would think tone seems to be the thing that separates Canada from the United States. And of course, there is more real difference between all the provinces in Canada than there is between Canada and the United States. So we do allow the United States to influence us an awful lot, even though we're not bound by their laws. We do follow CEC, which is the Council of Exceptional Children. We tend to follow a lot of their different ideas when we do things in Canada. But I have a document here for you I want to show you. This is a CEC publication on the standards that special education teachers are expected to have to be qualified instructors in special education. We don't have anything like this in vast parts of Canada. In fact, I was on a board trying to develop standards for special education teachers in Newfoundland just last year and the year before, and it is still on the drawing table, and we do not have a standards document. Now, there are standards documents in Canada that we expect special education teachers to follow, but it is different all across this country. In New Brunswick, 55% of our teachers had a master's degree that were teaching in special education, and they specialized in special education. In Newfoundland, you needed a special education degree, really, to be a special education teacher, and we had a separate special education degree in addition to the BED for Newfoundland special education teachers. Not so much in some other provinces where almost any teacher can become a special education teacher and write up IEPs that are like in a template form. I think we need to address that in Canada over the years to come if we want to provide optimal service and professional service. I do think we have to raise our standards a little bit. But in the United States, standards are a big thing all across the 50 states. Okay, let me just finish up here and see if there's anything else I want to say about this. I was really happy with the textbook and how they addressed the IEP. I was really happy with the textbook on how they addressed disciplining students with emotional behavioral disorders. Because I love the emphasis that has been passed all across Canada and the United States on teaching students how to behave instead of just punishing students who can't behave. So I love that emphasis, and I love the emphasis on functional behavioral assessments and positive behavior intervention supports, and we're going to get into that a little bit later in the course. So I know I haven't done a really good job on differentiating between Canada and the United States here, but I think this map that you have before you, where you can see the differences across Canada, can be important to you, and a parent would appreciate that too. But if you want to know what's going on across Canada, just refer to that map. And like I said, it's mostly the tone, I think, and difference between Canada and the United States. And in Canada, we want to work with our parents. We want to tell them, look, we don't need to go to these great extents yet. We'll work with you, and we'll take the long view with parents and try to work out as many things as we can. So I think that's it for this week. I hope everything's going well with you, and if you have any questions or any concerns, please email me and let me know, and I'll try to help out in any way I can. All right, we'll talk to you later.